Good morning, Bitcoiners. Rainy day, but the sun is up, right? We know the sun is up. We see it. And I checked. Despite the price, despite the trouble, Bitcoin is certainly running. No difference. So we can have our coffee, talk about the news. I smell optimism. So, today, morning everyone. Morning Dex. Morning Fair Trade Trousers. Morning Justin. Kevin Opar asks, Nolan, did you see Hu Jintao get removed? His name might mean Gold Way. Yeah, we'll talk about that a bit today. We got a lot of Gold Way talks, actually, so that's a good coincidence. Morning, bud. It's a good coincidence. We're all about the Golden Age. We're only going to be talking about the Golden Age. Today is all about the Golden Age and how the FTX situation has brought us so much closer to the Golden Age. And first, let's just start with a bit of FTX porn, because there's a lot of funny stuff going on out there. There's now, I guess, the girl involved. People are bringing up all these videos of her being the CEO of FTX, and just the brain dead fiat stuff she talks about, the giggling, the moronic uptalk. I mean, it's everything you want. It's everything you want to see out of someone who scammed money, because it indicts the entire community, right? So that's a part of something that's interesting. Yeah, the CEO of Alameda Research, not FTX. Pardon me. Yes. The CEO of Alameda Research, not the CEO of FTX. So I misspoke. You've got now, so they're on the run. I guess they backdoored FTX. They've taken some money. People are charting flights to, which flights are leaving Bahamas. There's some that are going to Argentina. And, one of the insights, so they were talking about it on Tucker Carlson last night. And they made one great observation that, people buy these insurance policies, right? These golden insurance policies. So there's all kinds of people looking into SBF's association with the SEC and Gary Gensler. And I guess that girl, that swamp monster girl, her dad was, I guess, Gensler's boss, right? And then, we've covered the CFTC stuff, and I'm pushing that. Once again, I have no knowledge whatsoever of a connection between the FTX prediction markets and what the CFTC did to prediction markets, right? So I don't know any connection. All I'm saying is, the minute the CFTC came out with their prohibition against election, against prediction markets and election, I said, wait a minute here. No explanation. I looked for the explanation. I just want to know why. I like to bet on elections, right? There was a cap. Everyone lived with the cap. It was like you couldn't bet more than $500, but it was a hell of a video game, right? And people like myself who have been able to, bet basically on intuition and against the odds. I mean, I made a lot of money off Trump getting elected because I bet anyone who would take money at the time. I was giving people straight odds. I was so convinced. I gave straight odds to people in 2015 when he was still candidate Trump. I said, I'll go with you. What do you want to bet? One fella, one of these early ETH people, obviously a big lefty. And so when I first quit the Senate, I was working at Decentral, which was the original co-working space for Bitcoiners. And this co-working space was associated, actually, weirdly, here's one of these other coincidences. When the Bitcoin embassy opened or the Bitcoin Center, I forget what they called it, the one in Manhattan in Wall Street that opened really in the wake of Occupy, right? With Austin Alexander, who I knew and worked with later at Kraken, Nick Spano, all these guys started their Bitcoin, I forget what they called it, the Bitcoin Center or something like that. It was in Manhattan, and it was begun on New Year's Day 2014, the exact same day that Decentral in Toronto opened. So two of these things opened the same day. We had the Bitcoin embassy in Montreal as well, that Francis Pouliot, Toxic Frankie, who was just the best, right? I love Frankie. He was, I'll be speaking with the Bull Bitcoin guys next week, actually, about some mischief in Canada. So all these things sort of weirdly started on the same day, right? I always thought that was a crazy coincidence. No one planned it, right? We just found out, oh, there's another thing in New York, not just Toronto. And it was a pretty neat place. Like a lot of Bitcoin magazine articles were written out of there. One Vitalik was still writing for Bitcoin magazine, one of the founders, believe it or not, of Bitcoin magazine. And the Ethereum paper was written there, and all of these people participated in the launch. I did not participate in the crowd sale. I was sort of, at the time, still working for the government and kind of banned from it. So it's not because I knew it was a scam, and I didn't have a technical understanding. I still hadn't met a lot of Core devs at the time. Within the same year I did, within the same year I met a lot of people at Core, because the original Scaling Bitcoin conference was actually held in Montreal at that time in 2015. So the whole world came to me. It was crazy. And Blockstream, people don't know this. Blockstream is actually headquartered in Montreal, my hometown. So I got to meet all these people. Started by a Montrealer. It wasn't just Adam Back. It was another Montrealer who I knew through friends. Weirdly, it was someone who said, "Oh, you're interested in Bitcoin." This other guy, Austin Hill, who started Blockstream, was a friend of a friend. So it was a small world to me. I was getting all these people from early ETH. Like, I literally could just turn over and say, "Vitalik, what do you think about this?" And I did multiple times, right? So what does he think about mining and, all these kinds of things? He was right about most stuff, right? I had it wrong back then. I didn't think Ethereum was going to work. He was right. It did work for whatever it is. It worked. Anyway, just fun little tales. But today we're going to talk a bit about that, the unseen world and what we can see. So when we see everything going on, even with Elon Musk, right? People got the knives out. Depending on how you look at the Elon Musk situation, it's either the worst thing that ever happened to Twitter, right? So you can see it that way. You can see the blue check has flooded the usage for some people and made it really hard to use. You do have sort of scams going on. This one's great. Did you guys hear about this insulin company or pharmaceutical company, and someone came out and used whatever Sybil attack was available with the confusion around identified accounts and verified accounts and blue checks on Twitter, and pretended they were the pharmaceutical company, said insulin was going to be free, and the stock of the company tanked. Now, I haven't looked into all the details, but that kind of stuff is going on right now. So there's a lot of people out there saying Twitter is going to collapse and it's a disaster, and all kinds of Eli Lilly and company. So there's a lot of people saying Twitter's a disaster. At the same time, right? And how much money they're burning, and there's this whole effort around there to sort of paint the whole project as a complete chaotic failure. And that might be the case, right? It might be that worldview may remain consistent and predictive, right? We're always about predictive worldviews being the more accurate one. So the one that predicts and comes true usually has things right in the time that does. We talked about that yesterday. And what we see now is a bunch of people saying it's not going to work, right? Bleeding revenue, millions of dollars a day, can't fire people fast enough. There's this new leaked audio, if you heard it this morning, of Elon firing some of the C-suite. And it's actually perfect, because just like that moronic uptalk girl, the CEO of Alameda, that just ridiculous. If we can agree on one thing, Bitcoiners, we have to get rid of moronic uptalk. Like, it's the worst thing, right? We need people to finish sentences on a definitive tone and be able to speak in a coherent manner and no longer this inflective uptalk, right? SBF had it. It's the fiat way to speak, right? It's absolute pure fiat vocabulary. Only the fiat mind could come up with such feeble use of language. You have to basically have the same, air bubble in your brain to end up speaking like this, if it's not by design, right? If it's not by design. So you've got this C-suite person in Twitter with total moronic uptalk about and filled with left-wing sort of colloquialisms, right? It's just not my the kind of things they were saying where it's not conducive to a non-aggressive work environment. I made that up, but it was along those lines. And then you get Elon Musk's voice in, right? So he just comes in and says, if you can't show up at work, you're out of here. Consider it a resignation, right? It's just funny stuff, right? And so depending on how you look at it, right? All the C-suite is leaving. Total chaos. Elon is having a lot of trouble. But if you flip it, you can hear an entirely different point of view, which is, what company ever failed because the C-suite left, right? What are these executives doing exactly, right? I've worked in a lot of companies. I think they can get on without most of the executives, right? And then Elon tweets out that Twitter use is at an all-time high, right? They've never had more users than now. So depending on how you look at it, it's either chaos or about to create a whole new world, right? And don't forget, Elon is now pushing the P2P payment network narrative into Twitter. I continue to think he's going to embrace Bitcoin and all of these things. So we don't know about that. We're not going to bother speculating on that now. What we really want to talk about is these settings, right? Look at what's going on with SBF and the people from the industry, the crypto industry, that killed him, right? They killed him, right? You've got CZ, Eric Voorhees, a bunch of folks came in and just slit his throat and left him to die, right? Euphemistically, of course, because of what he was doing. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about any of those things. People saw, gave him warning, and murdered him. What's going on with Elon Musk is similar in a sense that there's a fight that you can't really see, right? There's a fight that you can't really see. It's being alluded to, right? It's participants that we can derive a bit of it, but all of it looks a little bit like, in Harry Potter, when the Muggles are kind of looking at the war between the wizards, the good wizards and the bad wizards. And as the books go on and the movies go on, the wizard world war starts to bleed over to the Muggle world, right? So in the first couple of stories, the Muggles are completely unaware of the beginning of tension and war in this world, right? The wizard world is kind of sort of unified because Voldemort, the bad guy, is gone, and there's this peace in the wizard world. So the Muggle world is able to live in harmony with the wizarding world. As the story goes, the wizarding world ends up having a war, and the war spills over to the Muggles, and they only sort of know that something's up. They don't understand there's this war going on. I've been lucky enough in my life to be able to see through, that's a fiction that that there's this, I'm not saying wizard war or anything, but there is an unseen fight, right? So we're going to talk about the unseen fight today. There is an unseen fight, right? And you can get drips and drabs of it. I'm getting drips and drabs, but I'm able to talk to a few of these people unilaterally, and I was able to do it as well when I worked in Parliament and all these things. I don't want to say I worked in government, because Parliament is not the same as government, right? Parliament is where we create laws, and government is like a bunch of people we hire, right? When I worked in Parliament, just like if you work in Congress, we've confused government with the legislatures. They're not exactly the same. I'm anti-government, but I think you need a legislature. I would like to reduce the words in the Constitution and simplify it, right? We talked about it, don't touch me or my stuff, right? I'm pretty sure that would capture everything in the Constitution. But nevertheless, I'm all for a couple of legislators who can argue about this stuff, and that's a different thing than government, right? It's a different thing, and it's even in a practical sense. When I worked in those positions, I could have been fired in a second. We were called exempt staff, so we were not bound by any collective bargaining protections or anything like that. One mistake and you're out of there, right? It was not like a government job in a sense, and you can lose your job through no fault of your own. Right? An election change, you didn't do anything wrong and you're out of a job. Right? That's the way the thing works, which I'm totally for. Right? I'm not trying to change that, but it's not the same as the government, right? You get some trappings of government, but it's not that. It's execution, and there is a bit more of a spontaneous drive in that workforce. You don't get the same kind of placid. You can find it. People have found ways to survive in that environment, just like others. But anyway, there's this unseen fight, right? And because I was early into the industry, I've got access to a lot of these folks. I mean, I worked directly for Barry Silbert for years, right, as a spokesperson to promote Bitcoin within institutional New York City environments, right? That's really what my mandate was. That's kind of why now that I don't work for those guys, I can do this show, because what you're getting is the salesman that Barry sent to teach people, right, about Bitcoin on Wall Street, right? And that was my job. That was my job. I would go to family offices. I would do mainstream media stuff for CoinDesk, but ultimately people wanted to meet with us and talk about things. And learn about things. There was a lot of learning, 2016, 2017, right? A lot of learning. And no one ever told me what to say. So I taught off the book that I knew, which was Bitcoin first. Everything else is a consumer tech, play the game. It's a video game. Maybe you'll do well, maybe you won't. But what we're really for is all the stuff we're talking about in this show, right? Time preference. And my main arc was to talk about the trickle down of cryptography to the individual, right? And how that completely flips the power situation, negotiating power, and what individuals actually hold. So, I was free to roam in that realm, right? I was given all the latitude to do what I thought was right to push Bitcoin and things like that. I spent a lot of time with the New York Stock Exchange and backed, Adam White, who used to be at Coinbase, and talking with them about appearances and shows. They launched back at a show that I produced. And, you had the owner of the New York Stock Exchange, and they created the, physically deliverable futures contract. That was something that I was super interested in, right? I promoted proof of reserves around that whole area. And when I went and worked for Kraken, I was singularly interested in proof of reserves because I predicted most of what we're experiencing today in this environment. So all that to say, there's an unseen war, right? And I saw it in politics, right? I worked for a prime minister and saw who was friends with who and who was fighting and all these things, and which institutions worked and which didn't. And, I got to see entire global politics as like a car engine, and I could see where things were and things were having trouble and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, hybrid Bitcoinization, HP is a good metaphor. It's also the Wizard of Oz Fed versus magic internet money hodlers spilling over to the normal world. What's up, Muslim Bitcoiner? Yeah, so we're going to get in. This is a totally different story today that I'm going to mention to you guys. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. It's amazing, but it refers to the unseen war, right? And we're gonna talk about that. So all this stuff going on, there's something behind the curtain. I have a little bit of insight, right? I've been able to, in my life, have a little bit of a look. I know people who went to Bilderbergers. I myself organized for CoinDesk, WEF, World Economic Forum press passes. I never went on the trip because my whole vision for it was taken away and altered, right? I wanted to go and prank them and be irreverent and be a brat and all these things. And it turned into, no, let's go and fit in and take it seriously. So I abandoned the whole project. It was absolutely not what I had in mind, right? I went to get kicked out and we weren't going to get kicked out in the end. I had no interest, right? So not that I even like, I don't, the WEF stuff and Soros, I don't give a shit about that, right? I know enough people that know that. I just don't care, right? These are old, stupid people. They're not part of the fight that I'm talking about today, is what I'm saying. Or if they are, they're just minor characters, right? There's other characters that we're going to talk about. So this fight is going on, right? There is an unseen fight. I'm not trying to allude to, we see everything. Obviously not, right? Obviously not. But what I'll talk about today is a book, Wishes and Rainbows. Has anyone ever heard of it? In the comments, has anyone ever heard of this book? Let me know if you've ever heard of it. I'm going to go over it with you guys today. So Wishes and Rainbows was actually a book published by the Boston Federal Reserve. Did you know that? Published by the Boston Federal Reserve. They wanted to teach children, so here it is. They wanted to teach children. Who's the author? It's the Boston Federal Reserve. The actual physical names are Deborah Carpenter Beck, adapted by Stéphane Deveau, and there's two illustrated versions. There's a 1980s version and a 2007 version. The 2007 version comes with a addendum called The Road to Ruta. The Road to Ruta. It's the teacher's addendum to the book. All right. So The Road to Ruta and the two editions of Wishes and Rainbows. So what is Wishes and Rainbows about? Well, it's amazing, right? The Boston Fed published this, right, to teach children about economics and things like that, right? That was the cover. That was the cover, let's say, right? So what happens in Wishes and Rainbows? Well, it turns out the world is set underground. Okay, the world is set underground. Big people live above ground, right? The big people live above ground, And they're afraid of them down in Pebbleton. It's something Canyon, right? Boulders Ridge and Gopher Junction. What's it called? Anyway, they live in a world. Keynesian propaganda expect no. Wait till you see. No, not at all. So in this world, right, there's no color. There's no color at all in that world. And they live underground, no color, right? But they know about a time, and they read all their stories, right, about a world that had color, right? So they're stuck with shades of gray, but they learn about a world where there was different colors, right? The Pebble people learn about blue, pink, yellow, all these different colors, right? The mother's listening. The mother reads Ruta is the name of the girl. Ruta is the name of the girl, right? But they're not so happy in their world of no color. For centuries, they heard stories of colorland, and they want to see the colors. So they have stories about it, right? So the mother reads the story, and then Jack saw the goose flap its wings and lay a magnificent golden egg. And Ruta asks, what does golden mean, right? What does golden mean, Grandma? She talks about the golden color of colorland, and it's the most important, right? This color of gold is the most important color. And now she warns her again, don't go up there. You can get stepped on, right? The color people are too big. So there's a prohibition about going above ground. But one day she's out there playing, right? And out of nowhere, light comes in. Some gold light comes in, right? And she rolls the boulder outside and manages to get outside, and she sees the world of color, right? She sees it for the first time. And what she ends up doing is she picks a flower, right? She picks a flower and brings it back to the people, and they love it, right? This flower is the most important thing. And everyone is just amazed by the color. She's brought color to their world, right? She plants it in the middle of town, all right? And everyone gets to look at it. But now they start saying, well, what are we going to do with they want more flowers, right? Because people are so interested. So she goes on another mission to get them. But when she gets there, the PDF is online. It's all free. When she gets there, a boulder falls and her exit is trapped, right? So she looks around for another hole and she finds one, but it's high up, right? It just shines light down. When she gets back, they can't get out. They can't reach it. They can't get any more flowers, right? So when they get out, now the flower is starting to die because it's in the gray world and there's no sunlight. So everyone's crying. But it turns out that her tears, right? Her tears are useful because they bring the plant to where the light was coming in, and they plant it using her tears, and it starts to grow into more plants, right? But there's only 3. So now in town, everyone's arguing about who gets the 3, right? And they start coming up with their own rules. The mayor says I should get it, right? And at first they say, well, let's give it to the 3 oldest people. That's Ruta's idea. Let's give it to the 3 oldest people, and they will. So she's here contemplating what to do, and she's writing numbers into the ground, and she's been thinking, and that's where she gets her idea to give it to the oldest people, and she plants new flowers, and they grow, right? So now they have more, and they keep working to make more flowers under that light. They find another light, and now there's more, and they can manage it. But in the end, the conclusion is, but the townspeople are still not content. Many want 2, 3, and even 4 flowers of their own. Since Ruta cannot grow that many in only 2 sunlit caves, she and Rocky still search for another opening to colorland. So don't be surprised if some summer day, when you're lying on the green grass and looking at the blue sky, you hear voices coming from underground. It could be Rocky and Ruta searching for the entrance to colorland. So in the end, this book was written as a gold standard propaganda. So not Keynesian, right? Actually about fulfillment, actually about the human desire to be selfish, the human desire to want something for yourself, and our ability to manage resources, count, all these things, right? And in the education version, right, you get even more allusions to this when the teachers are trying to explain that you should understand gold standard economics by reading this book, and the teacher's version makes it explicit, right? Now, when we think of this unseen war, right, when we think of this unseen war, did you know these facts? Did you know that Alan Greenspan was Ayn Rand's protege? Did you know that Alan Greenspan was, so Alan Greenspan, before he became the Fed Reserve Chair for 20 years, during the time these books were first written, by the way, during the time when these books were first written. When Reagan took power in the 80s, Reagan opened up a commission with Ron Paul to look into going back to the gold standard, right? To look into going back to the gold standard. What would it mean? What would it entail? And Ron Paul was one of the leaders of it. Ron Paul, who is a big fan of this book, by the way. And they used Alan Greenspan's work. Alan Greenspan has a famous paper called Gold and Economic Freedom, right? Gold and Economic Freedom, Gold Bug. And Alan Greenspan says at the conclusion of this essay, right? In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to, oh, dang, I printed it wrong. Ish. Ooh, I'm missing a whole line of letters here. Let me just get my phone so I can read it properly to you. I have it screenshotted, but I printed it incorrectly. 1 second. Don't worry, I got it. Okay, here we go. In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have made its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. If everyone decided, for example, to convert all his bank deposits to silver or copper or any other good, and thereafter decline to accept checks as payment for goods, bank deposits would lose their purchasing power and government-created bank credit would be worthless as a claim on goods. The financial policy of the welfare state requires that there be no way for the owners of wealth to protect themselves. This is a shabby secret of the welfare state's tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme. Why am I not getting this done? Is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statists' antagonism toward the gold standard. Okay, so what did the commission find, right? So Plato's Ave category, some themes also taken from Wizard of Oz, starting out in the gray world. Yes, nihilism. Yes, the Wizard of Oz gray world. It's a bit like Pleasanton, you know, the Pleasantville, you know, that other show, which I loved, right? I loved Pleasantville. Story seems to focus on hedonism. Bitcoin standard focus on truth. Yeah, it's not an exact analogy. So what I want to do is just allude to the unseen war, right? I just want to allude to the unseen war. And another finding, the more important finding of this study as relates to FTX, my prediction about FTX and what I think is how it's gonna play out. So I'm gonna get to that. So Greenspan, in case you didn't know, Ayn Rand advocate, right? Ayn Rand pupil, ends up this thing that I just read was written in the 60s, I think, 60s or 70s, far before he got the role with Reagan, but far before he was with Ron Paul on that committee looking into what we should do about returning to the gold standard. But here's what they found. This is the important part, right? This is the real important part. So the commission ended up using that document that I just mentioned, as well as another essay written by Bertil Nasland in the 1960s or 70s, again, thereabouts that time, right? Similar to when he wrote it. And it's called On the Road to the Golden Age. On the Road to the Golden Age. He's an economist. And what he ended up discovering, and this was the main finding of Reagan's committee 15 years later or whatever, right? So this was written in the 60s, became the main advice of this 83 commission with Ron Paul and Greenspan, ordered by Reagan, about returning to the gold standard. And the finding is the following. On the Road to the Golden Age basically makes the argument that the only way to change the fiat system and return to the gold standard is to run the fucker hot. Run fiat into the ground. It wasn't about changing people's minds. Bertil, who wanted the gold standard back, said there is one way and one way alone. In the end, Ron Paul and the commission and Greenspan entirely agree with this process. And it's in the 1983 commission findings, right? It is in the 1983 commission findings. Here it is. There was a minority report, right, led by Congressman Ron Paul, that suggested a delay in the implementation of the gold standard until the Reagan administration and the recommendations of the Gold Commission were given an opportunity to prove themselves. In other words, it was decided to continue to run the printers to infinity, collapsing the system and proving you could not achieve price stability without sound money. With the plan set to run the unbacked fiat system to infinity, soaking up all the benefits of free money since 81, 82, before returning to sound money. So here were the actual conclusions. The majority of us at this time favor essentially, this is Ron Paul, no change in the present role of gold. Yet, we are not prepared to rule out that an enlarged role for gold may emerge at some future date. If reasonable price stability and confidence in our currency are not restored in the years ahead, we believe that those who advocate an immediate return to gold will grow in numbers and political influence. If there is success in restoring price stability and confidence in our currency, tighter linkage of our monetary system to gold may well become super regulatory. I don't know what that word means. The existence of the minority report was not revealed by the Gold Commission until a few days before the final revision of the report and was intended to represent all views. So in the end, they say run it hot, right? Run it hot. And this article is about basically persuasion, and that the only way to get to the point where we fix the system is by sinking the current one we're in. Now, I've always believed, right? Always believed that the way forward with all this crypto shit was to let crypto grow until it sinks Wall Street and the dollar. And that Bitcoiners and all of their lessons learned, all of the stuff they've been preaching, will become that much more relevant, timely, and decisively useful for your life. And isn't that what we're seeing now, right? Like, when I take a look at our own event at Bitcoin Magazine, for example, right, and I look at our sponsors, right, nowhere in that event do I see anything related to FTX, Alameda, all of these folks, all the things they put money into, da, 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 da. You can already see there is a cleavage in the industry. And we all know that, right? On this show, we are advocates, of course, of not your keys, not your cheese, and all of these things, right? We've been talking about custody, individuation, self-sovereignty, right? These are the important issues. Time preference, right? We're against consumption, debt-based societies, right? That is the point of this show. The point of this show is to contrast the psychological conditions that lead to making dollars contrasted with leading to making Bitcoin. And the argument is the commercial relationships that go into making Bitcoin will create a better society than the commercial relationships that go into making dollars, which continue to just spiritually empty us. And that's the difference, right? That's the difference. And this book, right? Here's the explanation of the road to Ruta, right? And we'll get into what that might mean in a second. But the road to Ruta was written in 2007, right? This is the teacher's addendum. And here's the conclusion, right, or the summary. The following Road to Ruta letter was written in January 2007 and lays the foundation for understanding the gold manipulation conspiracy. The events that have transpired in the global economy and the credit crisis have all confirmed the original thesis of this document, that there is a group of people that were secretly rigging the gold markets for decades. This process has taken over by the banking trust cabal, but now the original system riggers are dedicated to destroying the banking cabal, destroying the fiat monetary system, and installing the old US constitutional gold standard. So I'm not here to agree with that conclusion, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there is a fight going on. Whether these people were doing that or not, I'm unsure, right? I'm unsure. But Bitcoiners are fighting this fight. And people like Eric Voorhees that did go out and help destroy SBF, right, have always been fighting this fight, right? It's been there for a long time. And I think there are other people out in the system, right? I would put Elon Musk in that group. I would put even those, a couple Silicon Valley folks in that group, right? For me, the check is really the time preference piece, right? If you notice and are concerned about consumption, about spiritual fulfillment, and that's the frame you're taking for the money, that you understand that literally our spirit is bound to the quality of our money. Literally, our spirit is bound to the quality of our money because it shows incentives and drives people into certain areas. We talked yesterday about how decisions like of this quality and magnitude are not rational, right? They're mostly emotive and intuitive. We use rationality to justify our decision-making process, but we are not rational creatures and we do not make rational decisions. So I continue to argue that Bitcoin will never advance if we just argue for self-custody and self-sovereignty and individuation and sovereign individualism, right? These things must be found by people in their own way, right? And it often comes with pain, unfortunately, right? Because the human brain responds to these stimulation more than a critter out of my yard. It's okay. Got the gun. So humans respond to these conditions more. What is going on right now in mainstream media and what will continue to go on for the next few weeks with SBF, just look at their physical appearances. And I'm not a fat shamer, and I don't normally and wouldn't under normal circumstances underline someone's physical appearance for anything derogatory. But in this case, what I want to talk about is the persuasion angle, because we've got to through that, right? Seeing these super ugly people, all right, and all of their associations with the ugly, going to be one of the best things Bitcoiners ever experienced, right? Watching collusion between the SEC, CFTC, and the crypto industry play itself out is going to orange pill more people than any other event I could ever come up with. They said when Justin Trudeau came out and made me a terrorist and targeted me as a terrorist, just like, did you see this, the federal US government yesterday talking about Elon Musk? Did you see that? Did anyone see that? Chilling. One of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life, right? And if these kinds of things don't white pill, black pill, orange pill, more people. I mean, we've already got a healthy portion of the population that's changing their ideas, very distrustful, want to totally upend the system. You're going to get the most amazing, and that's what Trudeau did. When Trudeau went out and made me a terrorist and made other people terrorists and used War Measures Act against Bitcoiners for political donations, what we saw was the biggest orange pill event in the history of Canada. I mean, I said it couldn't be done that you could orange pill millions of people overnight. It was done. To this day, Canadians remain some of the savviest understanders of Bitcoin because of that. I mean, look at the amount of maxis that come out of Canada that can't even live in Canada anymore, right? They're already refugees, right? They're already refugees. If you'd have told me 10 years ago, all the early Bitcoin people would have had to leave Canada because they're refugees, I'd have thought you were insane, and I wouldn't have seen it as a good thing. Do I see it as a good thing now? Yeah. We're showing the world how corrupt the system is, and you can't teach this stuff. A children's book is a pretty good start, but what we're talking about here is mega politics. What are mega politics? They're the forces that are alluded to in the sovereign individual. This isn't your choice. The printing press brought changes to the world that might have looked like conscious choices to people, but they weren't, right? The flow of history wiped out common sense that had been known before the printing press and altered people's perception of right and wrong, benefit and liability. And that's what we're headed to. Right? That's what we're headed to. Watching this backdoor runaway thing, do you know how many people in the fiat system are about to learn this lesson? Right? Do you know how good it is to talk about liabilities and assets and bank balance or balance sheet? Forget about the bank part, but just balance sheet literacy. Balance sheet literacy. Something crazy like 70% of Americans can't even read a balance sheet, right? And again, Bitcoiners' main benefit, besides the technology, is that we're bringing financial literacy with a beautiful corollary of energy literacy, right? Those two forms of literacy are going to be enhanced by all of this. And here's my meta thesis frame, right? My meta thesis frame. And it's something I'm going to produce in content leading up to Bitcoin Miami in May. And it's this, because I kind of think that the events have taken over colleges and universities, and you kind of get a college and university experience. How many people in BTC after debacle is warming? It hurts that the nature of the beast. Returning to after. Yeah. How many people returning to BTC after every day is warming? Yeah. So I think what you're saying, Muslim Bitcoiner, is that Bitcoin is every debacle draws in more people. Yeah. So here's what I'm thinking for the event. Already, I believe that the events have taken over the void or the vacuum left by higher learning and education institutions that can't handle Bitcoin. It's way too much for their calcified brains. And therefore, it never really had the uptake you would want. A couple of classes here and there. They would celebrate, oh, the students are teaching the teachers, right? I heard that for years. Absurd. The events have taken over the whole experience, and it's a better experience. It's like, a tenth of the cost, and it's 4 days instead of a whole year. And the 4 days, you get the whole college experience. You get the friends, you get the homecoming feel, you get the socialization, you get all that stuff. You get the seed oils, god darn seed oils all over Miami, everywhere. We got to find a way to get, a seed oil free experience at the event this year, but it's hard. So here's what I think about doing. What do we have in schools in America? If you don't know about this in America, a really fun thing we do in our high schools and universities are yearbooks, right? We do these yearbooks. And the yearbook is pictures that were taken throughout the academic year. There's like a section on our sports, the cheerleaders, and every grade gets their pages, right? It's just their school portrait. And there's a couple of fun pictures mixed in of cliques and gangs. These girls who always hang out together, and they're in that grade will have like a feature corner of a page with other portraits around them. And there'll be 2 or 3 pages of just fun things that happened in the year. They had a Halloween day or a Christmas party or a dance, and whatever the class did, a school trip, they'll just flood all the pictures in. They're fun because we sign the books, right? We sign all the books. You sign your friend's book. You at the last day of school in general is when you get the book, or one of the last days of school, you get your copy, and everyone signs, and there's notes, and have a great summer, and blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of fun, right? I'm not making a yearbook. What I am doing is lining human capital migrations to Bitcoin and calling it a yearbook. And what I mean is, if you took the class of 09, right, that's the cryptographers reading list, the mailing list, right? So cryptographers are the first class of Bitcoiners, right? I'd say the second class of Bitcoiners were the gold bugs, the libertarians, the political people, right? So 2 sentimental classes, one after the other, right? The cryptographers wanting this direct P2P power for a long time, deploying public key cryptography without third-party public key infrastructure, because when you're online and you're using, this is a crazy story. Whitfield Diffie, the guy who invented public key cryptography, I booked him to do a show, and I organized it with Zuko and Whit Diffie in conversation, right? I just wanted 2 cryptographers. This was like months after Zcash was even launched. In my mind, Zuko was still sort of a Bitcoiner, and Bitcoin Core was upset with me because I didn't put a Bitcoiner on the stage. So I regret it, but I still think Zuko, he's changed a lot, but at the time, I thought it was appropriate. Anyway, it was a great session if you want to go watch it. So Zuko and Whit Diffie, and I'm doing the organizing email before we go on stage, and I had written the description of the panel, something like Bitcoin became the widest deployment of public key cryptography in the history of the world, and which was true, I thought, right? And it is true at the time and to this day. And Whit Diffie, the inventor of public key cryptography, came in the email and said, no, I think public key infrastructure, PKI, which is all the public key cryptography used on the internet to today, which is what you use when you go into your banking and you see the little lock on the address bar, right? That's public key cryptography. And what you're really doing, though, is just trading your certificate authority, right? You're giving the person who's running the keys to you your personal information, right? That's what all this account stuff is, right? That's what certificate authority and public key infrastructure, PKI, is all about. When it goes into that lock on your browser, you see a little. When it goes into that part of your browser, you see a little lock. That's the SSL, the secure socket layer, right? That's where the keys are transferred. So you're basically giving someone your information and paying them to manage your cryptographic keys for you, right? That's what's going on the internet every day, right? Every day, right? Your personal information for them managing your cryptographic needs. So when I wrote this description, it was just, the widest deployment of public key cryptography in the history of the world. Whit Diffie jumped in and said, no, I thought just like normal PKI was the largest distribution of public key cryptography in the world. He's right? He's right. PKI with the certificates, the third parties, all that is the widest deployment. But I had to correct the inventor of it in the email chain and say, actually, Bitcoiners don't consider that pure public key cryptography. That's just more third party stuff, right? And Zuko had to jump in too and very politely say to the inventor of the very thing that we're telling him is not the thing that he invented. Bitcoin is the thing he invented. Was a pretty funny, conversation. So cryptographers first, the political people next, right? Who came third? I call them the first non-sentimental generation. It's the Wall Street people, right? The Wall Street people came, and they didn't give a shit about Bitcoin up or down. They said it's tradable. Let's trade this fucker, right? So it's not a judgment on them. There were some sentimental people who came. I'm just talking about human capital migration, right? That's all I care about. When I see people come in, when I see bodies moving to Bitcoin, I take note, right? I take note, right? If I see people moving to Bitcoin, I don't even try to explain it. I don't try to put them in a limiting, try to read their mind or anything. They came over, they did it. I observed who they were, right? Some loved it, some didn't. But they were different than the previous two generations, the cryptographers and the political people, because they were sentimental about Bitcoin, right? These guys weren't sentimental about Bitcoin, which was cool, right? The next migration I saw, and this will bother a lot of Bitcoiners, but it's the truth, I don't know what to tell you, were more artistic folks, content creators, and of course, they loved NFTs, right? It started with the Pepes on Bitcoin with the counterparty NFTs, and you have to burn Bitcoin to produce an asset on Bitcoin. The original ICOs, by the way, were invented by this counterparty protocol, which was burn Bitcoin to issue something else, but at least we know it's a real thing because it came from something. And the original Pepes, of course, were created that way, and the original NFTs were created that way. And then, of course, NFTs went off and running, and they became their own thing. But we have to take note of the human capital migration, right? Whether or not they all came to Bitcoin and some went to Ethereum, it kind of doesn't matter for my argument. They came, right? The one I see now, and again, I make no mind-reading predictions about why they're doing it and what's going on behind their, thoughts and all that stuff. But what I see happening is the energy sector. Right? I see the energy sector. They're the next human capital migration. So when I see all this bullshit about Wall Street, remember, we're here to kill Wall Street. We're not here to make them richer or anything like that. My whole plan with Ethereum from the start was to run it hot. Let's take it down, right? I want the bubble to be bigger before it pops, much bigger, right? I want the collateral damage to be so great that people question all of Wall Street. Right? The biggest scam in the history of the world. That's what I want. And Bitcoiners, now you can say, oh, we become identified with it and it's all collateral damage to us. Maybe we're seeing the markets for Bitcoin anyway, troubled a little bit by what's going on. And I mean, I thought for a second you could definitely see bottom. You could see a real problem, when rumors were flying 2 days ago. But again, we're in a psychological war, right? We're in a psychological war. And how much do Bitcoiners now, like how many people were taken by surprise in Wall Street and crypto industry by SBF? Taken by surprise, have to readjust their worldview, right? All of them. What about Bitcoiners? Does any readjustment have to go on with Bitcoiners? Do I have to change my worldview? Absolutely not. I knew it was a scam. I told everyone it was a scam. Bitcoiners knew it was a scam. Bitcoiners have been preaching the remedies to this thing for a while. Bitcoiners need no change in their worldview. in order to keep living and doing what they do. It's the same thing as when COVID first started, right? When COVID first started, I would go on television just before COVID and I would say, oh, this reverse repo thing is terrible, right? Either the system becomes insolvent because I'm seeing $25 billion a day. I went on Joe Weisenthal's show. I went on CNN. I went on Fox. I went on all the networks, right? And they laughed. They said, oh, you idiot. Like, it's technical. You Bitcoiners don't understand the complicated banks and how they deal with each other. And I said, well, explain it to me. Like, what am I missing? I think I understand it. I think they're paying them what would otherwise be a forward contract, but because it relies on ancient law of trust, it's a bailment, right? I know all about bailment. There's nothing I don't know about bailment law. I'm working on creating a bank in Wyoming based on bailment. I get it. I know exactly what it is, right? So in the end, I had forget the virus for a second, right? My prediction was either they print massively or we have an insolvent banking system. It's one of the two, right? I said it live on television, right? What happened? Well, I was right? We had to print massively, right? That was one of my two options. So my worldview remained consistent. I didn't know about a virus and all that stuff, but I said we're going to have a major Fed event within the next few months. There's no way out, right? Now we know what reverse repo is at today, right? It went from 25 billion and ran itself up to $2 trillion a day. Right? That's where we're at. We're at $2 trillion a day to keep this zombie alive. Right? And now the SBF thing happens and it reinforces everything Bitcoiners have been saying. What adjustment does Bitcoin Magazine's event in Miami have to do? Well, if the whole world of finance has less money, there's some freebie, easy money that we could have gathered out there. But the core event, the core sponsors, mining is a little rough. You know, there's definitely some implications about the overall size of the industry shrinking, but the event is fine as far as I can tell. Right? As far as I can tell, we're ready to go. I'm working hard on it. It's not really an impact. Other folks in other events are going to have a lot of trouble, right? Because they don't know who's paying bills, who's sponsoring. All these things are problems, right? So Hyper Bitcoinization says, bring the Ragnarok. That's what I'm saying, man. Bring the fucking Ragnarok, right? I think pump it up, man. Pump up Ethereum. Let's go, right? Vitalik. We love it, right? We love it. Because we've got to get people to understand that this is not, it's not something you can teach necessarily. It's something you have to go through. And we talk about the democratization of finance. That doesn't mean sunshine and wishes and rainbows. It means losing and winning, right? But you got to understand, to win, you got to understand losing. You got to understand it, right? Yeah, Hyper Bitcoinization podcast says full fiat apocalypse, mimetic world terminus. Yeah, that's where we're headed. So look, Bitcoiners' worldview unchanged. And remember what this essay was called, right? On the Road to the Golden Age. That's another name for the show. Right? We're talking about the impending golden age. I think we're already in it. You want to know a sign that we're in the golden age? There's a sign. I think I found a sign that I can share with you, right? A sign that we're in the golden age is that educators become celebrities, right? So is Jordan Peterson a celebrity? I think he's the most famous Canadian there ever was. More than Wayne Gretzky, I've heard, right? So that's one example. How many more are there out there, right? What are Bitcoiners that we love, the celebrity Bitcoiners, besides educators, right? Is Andreas Antonopoulos not a celebrity? Right? You can't even reach the guy sometimes, right? I mostly copied my whole life off Andreas. When I saw Andreas for the first time, I was so struck by his sincerity and genuine nature that I copied the whole shtick, right? I mentioned earlier what I did with Barry and all that. The basic design of that was, it looks like Andreas is so good at his job that he has everyone taken care of as far as education. I can't even compete with that. He's too good. He's too many people and there's nothing else to say, right? He's just great at it. So my approach was, well, I could take his, and I was always, anything Andreas said, any content he created, I consumed it, right? And I would put my own shtick, but my original job that I invented for myself, there was no job description, right, When I worked at Decentral, no one paid me to work there. I could make money because people would hire me there, but I did not go there to work. I did not go there because I had a job. I went there to find clients and do stuff. I invented the job of going to institutions and not Bitcoin conferences. So I'd go to like an insurance conference in 2015. I would go to like trade finance conferences and whatever, anything that wasn't Bitcoin. I didn't go to any Bitcoin conferences or crypto conferences. I went to normie industry conferences and did Bitcoin sessions. And in a little bit of time, they paid me to do them. I would write research for CoinDesk, which I would turn into, and it was all sort of institutional level research. They would sell it to people on Wall Street, right? And Barry was a part of that, and da da da, which is normal, like sell side research, right? It was sell side Wall Street research, and so I would do these things, and go and get stage time, and usually the stage time might be free, but I would go to a city like Hong Kong or Singapore or Paris or Monaco or any one of these places, and I speak French, so it was possible to do it in English and French. And I would give a lesson, right? I would just be an educator, right? That's what I did. I just was an educator. And the reason I chose the market I did was I had to make money. I had quit and needed a job, I guess you could say. I invented my own job, which was this education piece, and just chose a smaller market to focus on because Andreas had the plebs all taken care of, right? So I saw this opportunity, and in the end, within about a year of doing it, Barry sort of said, "Well, I'll pay you to do this," right? And I was paid to do it through CoinDesk. Like, it wasn't Barry saying "I love you." It was me working with CoinDesk, and then Barry having some ideas on what I could do. So look, all of these folks that are educators, like, what is Breedlove, right? He's an educator. What is Matt Odell? He's an educator. They're all educators, right? Anyone who's working on the event, on the Bitcoin Magazine event, is a type of educator, right? We think about it internally as school, right? A type of education, and should be a fun school. I'm not interested in shitty, boring schools, but it should be thought of as a type of school, and that you come to learn, right? And more people are going to be interested in learning what we have to teach after this debacle. So, golden age incoming, guys. Golden age incoming. Muslim brother, good question. Staking claim on other planets, planetary warfare across hash horizons, soul coin. What's the challenge after after Wall Street is down? What's the next war? I think we avoid it all for a while. I mean, so in my science fiction book, I made a prediction about the next war, and it's not based on money anymore. So we live in my story, right? I set it 80 years in the future, and I wondered what entropic forces could hurt Bitcoin. Right? I don't want to give away too much of the story, but Vitalik tipped his hand on what I was worried about a year ago and what I actually put in my story. He's very interested in synthetic wombs, right? He's very interested in synthetic wombs. Synthetic baby creation, because of this whole like man women equal thing, and oh my god, women need to be more like men, I guess, and the thing that's keeping them down is reproduction, right? Apparently. So he's big into these synthetic wombs, and I said, well, that's actually what I think is the next war and would kill Bitcoin. So I tried to create a condition about what would be the worst thing for Bitcoin, and what I ended up coming up with was the following: that in a world where Bitcoin works and we figure out Wall Street, we actually also solve material want, right? There's no more material want. And in a world with no material want, new metrics or new qualities will become prestigious, right? So in my world, I don't want to give too much of it away, but basically there is no longer a need to be a prostitute, right? Because there's no lack of material want, but it doesn't end the desire to pay for the subjugation of another human, right? So that is not gone. So there are no women or men or whatever. There's no market. There's no supply of prostitutes, but there's a demand. So what ends up happening is they secretly sprinkle little bit of animal DNA and create basically mindless humans that are commodities. And so in my story, it's just the beginning of that. So you don't get to the actual change of the economy, but what it predicts is from there forward, we now have a new competitive element to measuring wealth. In a golden age, you measure wealth in Bitcoin. In this new dystopia, the major driving force of the economy is not money anymore. It's owning human life. It's the life creation markets. And creating a human life, and I put a bit of an insurance issue in there. So the legal system suggests that anyone who wants to be free that is created in these synthetic wombs can be. Right? It's very easy, right? You just say, I want to be free, you're done. Game over, you're free, right? But they're bred to never want that. They're bred to enjoy what they have and to never. And now the insurance companies, because when you buy one of these forms of life, you take insurance on its capacity to be free. So there's a huge incentive to limit their appetite for freedom. And they, put in different animal traits to make them domesticatable. And it's pretty dark. It's pretty dark. So my book is called The Satoshi Wedding Murders. The Satoshi Wedding Murders. There's only one chapter available. I've written the whole book. It's been ready for a few years. I wrote this book. I started to write it back in 2015, actually, on my honeymoon. I made my personal commitment to Bitcoin during my honeymoon for some weird reason. It was just a situation where I think, it was the summer of 2015. I'd already quit my job. I was already doing Bitcoin fully, but you're still counting my world in dollars, and I was stressed, and there was something, I forget the exact context, but I was in Corsica, which is just the most beautiful island in France with my wife, newly married wife. And just doing one of those, I had a beautiful, up on a hill, a porch, looking out on the sunrise, and something came over me that day, and I said, I give myself to movement. That's it. I'll do nothing else with my life, and I'll do nothing else besides this. And somehow at the same time, this idea of what could kill Bitcoin came to me. So I started to write it down, and I had most of the book written by the time I got back to Canada. We were there for like almost a month. So I had most of it written by the time I got back, and then I've worked on it since. I've had some folks read it. I had a really great editor brought in, and I did everything, as professional as I could. So it's called The Satoshi Wedding Murders, and chapter 1 is available, but I'm finding out a distribution plan for it all. I just haven't figured out how to get it to market first, but it's pretty fun. It's just a murder mystery, right? It's just a fun murder mystery. That's it, guys. That's what I got for today. So go check out these books. They're pretty cool. The comic looks cool. And I've read it. I've known about. Oh yeah, here's the one last thing. I just wanted to mention that because I saw the Ruta and I never mentioned why. So Greenspan, Alan Greenspan, right, the guy who wrote this book, who was the Fed chair all those years, who I'm saying is part of this. Muggle world. I'm sort of alluding that maybe he's like a Dumbledore, right? Did you know he was the world expert in computer banking? The world expert. He was one of the first people to have a Mac designed specifically for him to bank to use it within the banking system. And Ruta was the name, and he went back into the punch card programming days. He's a computer programmer. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. Alan Greenspan is a computer-minded person and was one of the original programmers to be interested in finance, right? And his original banking program was called Ruta, right? That was the root of the system. And Ruta, right? If you look at the original way he thought of it, because he was already thinking about bank security and attacks, and he was looking at it from a computer point of view, man in the middle, all those things. They hadn't even invented public key cryptography by the time he was thinking about this, right? Not even invented. No one knew about splitting keys yet. That was a civilian invention made by the guy Whit Diffie, who I interviewed and mentioned, and that wasn't until 78 or 79. So he is operating in a world where they have not invented cryptography that would be useful for a networked computer, right? And what he came up with is this Ruta system, right? Ruta. And when I look at the word Ruta, and so Ruta is the name of the girl in this story. So Greenspan wrote a book Greenspan created a program called Ruta, which was the start of computer banking. And the main character in the story of the Boston Fed is Ruta. Right? That's why I put it there. And Ruta, I mean root A, right? Root to me sounds a lot like a Genesis block, right? It sounds a lot like a Genesis block, and I think helps explain the message in the Genesis block, right? Chance on the brink. Now, it's just a coincidence, right? I'm not saying that the white paper was connected to this, right? I'm not saying that. I don't know. I have no clue, right? No clue. I'm just mentioning the coincidence because it's fun, right? Because the book is cool and it sort of syncs with other stuff, right? I don't know, right? You only know so much. All right. Dex says, thanks for the entertainment, the edutainment. Yeah, there you go, edutainment. These are such good stories. Thanks, guys. All right. Yeah, people have been asking. I think it was Fair Trade Trousers. If I could get these comments to come on to the other feed, I'm not sure how. I'm not sure how. And so he was saying, I want the live comments to end up on the YouTube comment feed because I refer to them in the show and it would be good for the show. I'm not sure how to do that. I'll figure that out. I'm also going to start being more diligent about putting the show notes as linkable as links in the description. I only haven't done that because I sort of add things one at a time. I have a lot of trouble with checklist technical complexity, right? So I'm only adding one thing at a time, the board, the broadcast. I do a tweet after now. I added a short this week to the show, like a 1-minute YouTube short. So I'm just adding things in steps. So if you're waiting for show notes, be patient. Next week, I'm going to be adding a few more features, but I just can't add things into my list too quickly. I don't want to turn this show into a burden to me, right? Like right now it works because it's absolutely not a burden. I love doing it, right? And I don't ever want to go to a point where it's a burden. So I have to manage technical complexity as much as I can because I hate that stuff. I'm terrible at it. We'll see. We'll probably add some resources to this show. Right now, we're still in a get used to it, get it working, make sure the systems are good before we get it a little bigger. But I love that you guys show up, and I love doing it. So far so good. So far so good. All right, team. See you tomorrow. No board tomorrow. I don't usually make boards on the weekend, but this was so colorful and interesting. I had to. Golden Age incoming, team. Ciao.